All right, all right. What is going on, everybody? And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Man Up Real Talk podcast. I am your host with the most, Mr. Mike Wiley, saying greetings and salutations to all of you, our faithful followers and listeners. Y'all know we appreciate all the likes, shares, clicks, downloads, subscribe, whatever it is that you do to support this podcast. Because we know that had it not been for you, it wouldn't be no us. So we do not take that for granted. Now, for those of you that may be joining or watching for the first time, we say welcome. And for those that's coming back for a second helping, we say welcome back. Because your boys is back on the air with the Man of Real Talk podcast, a podcast for the people. And as you can see, I'm never by myself because with me, as always, is my partner in crime, Mr. Philip Hines, a.k.a. Mr. Classic, a.k.a. OG Triple OG, who is always and definitely in the building. What's going on, son?
What's going on, brother-in-law? How you brothers doing tonight?
Man, doing good. And we got a third partner with us on today.
Yes, sir.
Listen, I can't even get into describing this man. Look, if I presented you with his bio, 70% of it would be redacted. That's all I'm saying. He has a lot of titles. He's a husband, father. As you can see, he's a Navy man, he's a veteran, engineer,
everything,
historian, film buff, playwright. I mean,
it's too much.
It's a lot. And out of all of those titles, you know what? I'm glad that I can call him friend.
Yes, sir.
And we are talking about none other than Brother Eddie K. Phillips, man. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Listen, 5-year celebration. We third week deep, and we are going back and talking about some of our revisiting some of our favorite shows. Just over our years of doing this podcast, man. And this particular one was one of my favorite ones. I don't know what it was about this show, but when I go back and listen to it, it's one of them kind of proud moments. Like, you know what? That was a good show.
That was a real good show, though.
It was a real good show. You know, I can't say it about all of them. I'm just saying, but that particular one, if somebody say, "Hey, man, you got a link to your show?" Yes, I do. That's one of the ones that I send out because I really thought that was a good show. And the show that I'm referring to is The Problem with Mermaids. Why are you laughing at this?
Because when I saw that title, I was like, yeah, there's a real problem with mermaids.
We're talking about the real problem with mermaids. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I ain't even in the picture. What the world? Let me move myself right here. All right. I don't know if you guys remember this, but back in 2019, Disney announced that they were doing a casting for a live action version of The Little Mermaid. You know, Disney has been on this thing where they've been trying to do live remakes of all of their cartoon classics, right?
Mm-hmm.
They destroyed The Lion King, which, you know, I'm not going to even get into that. And they did some other live action ones like Beauty and the Beast, just all the classic stuff. They've been doing live versions of it. So they have been looking for and casting for roles for The Little Mermaid. And they announced back in 2019 that they have finally found their Ariel. And the person who they found was a young lady by the name of Halle Bailey, not to be confused with one Halle Berry, because it was actually a lot of confusion about that. Some people was like, ain't Halle too old to be playing the role? Like, really?
Yeah.
Really, people? That's what we're doing. But no, it's not Halle Berry, but Halle Bailey, as you see here. Beautiful young woman.
Mm-hmm.
And she is she has actually been casted to play Ariel in The Little Mermaid. Now, as a result of this, there was mad backlash. What do you mean, son? You do know I'm live, right?
Sound like mine.
What? Yes, I'm live. What do you want?
It's like mine.
Yeah, like live.
What's good, nephew?
That sound like mine.
What type of how many lives is it? I am live.
Mine do the same thing.
Get out, Michael.
That's Mike.
What is it with fan? I don't understand. It's not like this is my first time doing this. They know. Anyway, Miss Hallie was she was cast as the Little Mermaid, and there was instant backlash. Instant. And you know why? Why was it backlash? I'm gonna tell you why it was backlash. Because you had a lot of people who was mad about the fact that Hallie here was black.
Yeah.
Yep.
And please, no, we're not saying that we don't like the fact that she's black. What we're saying is that it just goes against the traditional casting of that character. Ariel has been traditionally white, and mermaids are white. There aren't black mermaids. There was honest to God backlash that Disney said, this is our Ariel, and people were up in arms because this young lady was black. And I thought that it was ridiculous that they received such backlash. And then I thought, you know what? After that, I was like, actually, it's you can't expect it in the climate that we live in nowadays. It's expected. It's expected. But the big thing that people were talking about was that it went against the tradition. The tradition of the casting of this character. She's traditionally a white character. Now, I don't remember too many Little Mermaids. So to say that she's been traditionally cast as a white character, she's a cartoon.
Yeah.
So I didn't even think that was a valid argument. But people tried to I was on different sites when they were having a conversation, different forums, and people tried to argue me down. And they was like, she's a white character. Why would you cast her as black? And I'm like, why does it matter? If she's the best person for the role, why can't she play the role? The young woman can act. She got the looks for it. She can sing. I mean, she is basically the Disney trifecta. What is the problem? And do you know that some of these people actually tried to flip the script and say, well, what if they casted some traditionally black characters as white? I'm like who? What if somebody came at me and was like, what if they made Nick Fury white? I'm like, have you heard of David Hasselhoff?
They casted Liz Taylor as Cleopatra.
Come on. I'm just saying, but this is what people are saying. What if they made Luke Cage was white? Somebody even went as far as saying, what if they would have casted a white guy to play Ali? Would we have been upset?
That's it. Yeah, man. But
we would have been upset, but you know,
I would have been upset. I would have been upset about
reaching.
that. I'm just gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, whoever said that was reaching though with that one.
You know what though, man? I thought about it, and I said, yeah, I would be upset about that. What if they casted a white guy to play Malcolm X? Actually, I think that would have been a slap in the face. But y'all get what I'm saying.
They would do it, right?
Exactly.
And that's the difference, because they would do it. Yeah, and they would make it out to be an artistic piece.
Exactly.
Right? Several years ago, there's a movie with John Travolta, and it's called White Man's Burden. And when they made that movie, Harry Belafonte, and they flipped the script. If you've never seen White Man's Burden, they flipped the script in that movie where the blacks were in power.
Okay, I saw that movie. Yes,
Travolta plays the
really.
Yeah, that's a good movie too, Mike.
I gotta check that out. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, I know, but yeah,
they do that as a artistic piece, right? It's artistic. We're trying to show you that it's not about the color; it's about the character. All of that plays into it, and again, it comes down to the idea, though, Mike and Phil, that we got to stop lying to ourselves about Hollywood.
Come on.
We have to stop lying to ourselves about the media. We have to start lying to ourselves about the music industry, and understand that for the better part of 150 years, Black folks have been cast in stereotypes. And it is very uncomfortable, not only to whites, but to Blacks, to see another narrative confronted, right? Because when you have had so many stereotypes that have been put out there, whether it be the brute, whether it be the gollywog, whether it be the pickaninny, whether it be the mammy, whether it be the sapphire, all of these things that they have pushed on us, right? And when I listen to you all's original podcast, that's the issue. If a part of a huge section of America cannot accept a beautiful looking Black girl in any other role other than a sapphire, other than a character who's out here trying to sell, for the lack of a better word, booty, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't get that out of your mind, even though, that's why I laughed when we first started this one, mermaids don't exist, right?
No.
And if they did, that would be weird, right? So, and I don't know what man go lay down with a fish, right? And so there's some deep issues with that,
Right.
but we keep lying to ourselves about Hollywood. And I've said this for years. We keep telling ourselves, oh, they got our best interests at heart. They get up there on a liberal platform every Academy Awards, but they forget you every other month out of the year, right?
Every other month.
They only care when you bring your money into the theater.
Mm-hmm.
They're not when they make films about, we're talking about the mermaid. But let's think about this. When Nina Simone, I always bring that up. And I thought about that as I was listening to you all's broadcast. Nina Simone did a lot for the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. She wrote music. Yep. She gave money. She flew activists to other parts of this country. She went to Africa. She was friends with Malcolm X, Dr. King, leading people of the day. And when they did her biopic, the only thing they focused on was her mental issues.
Yeah, they did. Yes, sir,
and
brother Eddie.
They took Zoe Saldana and put it blackface on her.
Yep.
Right? And they focused on that. When they did Ray Charles, and we love Jamie Foxx, but they cannot let our people be clean. They had to emphasize that Ray Charles was a drug addict.
Yeah.
Right? They had to emphasize he was a womanizer. They had to emphasize that he possibly got one of his band members. She died because of his influence, right? And it left this idea that no matter how great these people are, we're always going to tag something. They do not need to play us in movies. They do not need to go a white man to play Malcolm X because they control the narrative of the movie anyway. So when you control the narrative of the movie, I don't care what color face you put on it. When Gods of Egypt came out a couple of years ago, they cast all them white dudes, European white dudes, and then argued the fact, the director actually said, well, there's no proof that the Egyptians was Black. As if he forgot that before European influence, before Ptolemaic influence, that there were Black Egyptians, Ethiopians as they call them, Somalians as they call them.
Thank you.
But see, we have this idea that Tanisha Coates is doing a movie, a Superman movie, where he gonna get Michael B. Jordan to play Superman. Why are we doing that? Right? Because that's not necessarily them. That's somebody saying, hey, let's play even kill with you and let this Black man be Superman. Right? As opposed to you going to go find some real hero, right? Or some design hero that some African American or somebody or anybody came up with that could be just as creative as Superman. But it's easier to play this role. This hey, let's swap the races in and out of here. What's that show everybody, all these women like they was all watching last year on Netflix, the British show, right?
Downton Abbey?
No, Bridgerton.
Yeah.
So they went into Bridgerton and they started adding Black folks into Bridgerton as if that was completely the way it was. I'm not saying that there were not Moors, there were not Black people in England or in Europe, but let's understand they were not up to that status. They were not up to that social status, right? And even when the Moors were in power, right? They did everything in their power to strip the Moors of their influence. But because we want to rewrite history, right? We want to change history to act like we being inclusive, when in reality, right? What you're doing is you're trying to cloud the waters here. You're trying to make us not really delve into what's going on. So when you get a fictional mermaid, everybody gets upset. Everybody's angry. But I heard you say on there, how many other movies did you make where you cast men and women who were white in black roles, right?
Let's talk about that, because think about it. When you go back and Phil mentioned Cleopatra, we know that they had Liz Taylor playing Cleopatra, right? Who played Moses in the Ten Commandments? Charlton Heston. He wasn't no more Egyptian than I was. Matter of fact, I was probably more Egyptian than he is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So then fast forward, like people like people's like, you went back real far with that one. Okay, well look at some of the more modern movies. Argo with Ben Affleck. And that was based on a true story. The man that he played was Mexican American.
Yeah, I heard that before. So that is true.
Scarlett Johansson, Ghost in the Shell. That was based on a Japanese anime. The main character was a Japanese female.
Yeah.
Why is Scarlett Johansson playing that role? You mean to tell me they couldn't find a Japanese girl that could have did that role? It's a lot. It's so many more instances where they taken characters of color or some other nationality and they casted that character as a white guy or a white woman. I mean, you want to talk about tradition? That's been a tradition of Hollywood forever.
Yes, it has.
Oh, yes.
Forever.
Yes, forever. And it is not changing. You remember back in I don't know if all y'all remember that there was a joke. The guy later said it was a joke. The screenwriter said that he was thinking when he was writing a possible screenplay about Harriet Tubman, he was thinking about let's cast Julia Roberts as Harriet Tubman.
He wasn't joking. He wasn't, and he wasn't even joking.
And the idea of that is we do these things, right? Because we whitewash, we tell a lie. I'm gonna go historical on y'all, and I told myself I was gonna try to avoid doing that, but I think
Come on, brother.
we need to do that.
Bring it.
Yeah, that's why we brought you. See, look, you gotta understand when when you own. See, I scratch the surface. I do little surface stuff, but see, you know how to go inside the crack and be like, listen, look at this.
And whenever Brother Eddie on, I just sit back and just listen.
Yes, sir.
I know you'll listen. Even come with the receipts. So go ahead, Brother Eddie.
Man, the reality of it is that majority. So there's this idea how films are created. And I'm gonna tell you as a screenwriter, I know how. I'm not gonna go into that, but I can tell you it's a process. And there's a man named Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is influential because if you go research him, Joseph Campbell is one of the reasons why George Lucas, one of the people he cites, what influencing him to do Star Wars, right? All the idea behind some of the Indiana Jones movies. Joseph Campbell basically traveled the world for over 50 years looking into myths and looking into stories and trying to show how Hollywood was doing nothing more than telling old stories, whether African, Indian, whatever, and telling those stories. You mentioned Lion King. Lion King is an African story. If you remove the lions and you add put the African people in there, it's an African story.
And that's why it was so good.
That is why it is
That is
good.
why it was, and that's people sit up there like I'm like, why do you think black people? I said, why do you think black people vibed with the Lion King? So it wasn't because it was animation. No, it was because it was something about that movie that we were able to connect with more than any of them other animated movies that they did, and it was because we knew that stuff. Look, Disney didn't come up with that.
No, it's African.
Come on, man.
Why you think so many people vibe with Black Panther, right?
Absolutely.
Those movies have an African cultural base in the music and the presentation, and they know that. And that is the reason why they are successful. And I'm going to tell you, they're not only successful with us, they're successful with other cultures because it's honest. There's a woman, Donna Zuckerberg, she wrote a book called Not All Dead White Men. And in that book, she talks about this idea, right, that the Greeks, See, I pick on the Greeks a lot whenever I talk to people, because we base a lot of our mythology. People could tell you who Zeus is, and they could talk to you about Greek mythology more than any mythology in the world.
Yes, sir.
And why is that? Because the European pushed the idea of Greek mythology on us. That's all good. That's all fine. But at the end of it, when you look at it, right, when you go and look at Greek mythology, all those places that Homer was talking about visiting, all those places that he was describing Minos and people with the golden touch, he was talking about Africa. He was talking about Northern Africa, but we weren't taught that in school. We weren't given that idea. We were thinking that they're talking about Greeks and whites, and they went to go see other white folks that look like them. And even when they tell it in the movies, even when we read it in the books, right? Because I grew up just like everybody else. That's the vision that we get.
Yeah.
Because that's the vision that they teach us. But archaeologists, historians are telling folks there's a issue in which what a historian said that, listen, you know, all of those Greek pots and things that y'all see that look white, when they were originally painted, those people were dark.
Wow.
They were brown. The Greeks actually referenced the qualities, the beauty of Black people. And we're not taught that. So in the myths, a lot of times the heroes were actually brown people, not white people. But what I just said right there is that's not what we have been taught. So even in film, when we talk about the mermaids, that's no different than the sirens that you look at in Greek myth, right? It's no different. They pulling people outside of boats, they seducing people. All of that comes from the same mentality.
Right.
But if you understand that the poetic roots around the 8th and 7th century, right, as Homer was writing his Iliad, as he was writing the Odyssey, he's talking about Odysseus, right? He was talking about Achilles, and people forget how important that those two tomes were, because from the Iliad we get the idea, the Roman idea of immortal glory, which we still see right now. If you go look at the Spartan movies and all of this stuff that you see, I'm going for immortal glory. I will die as long as I get glory. Yeah. We don't know what that glory is, but this comes from the idea that Homer pushed out there. But here's the funny part. When Homer describes Achilles, when he describes Odysseus, when he references them in beauty, he talks about them in a way of them being darker. Darker skin. As a matter of fact, if you read the Odyssey, he actually really goes in about how Athena, the supposed god, in order to enhance the beauty and the appearance of Odysseus, she made him black-skinned.
Wow.
She gave him kinky hair, woolly hair, right? And so when we look at these things and we don't understand that there is a method to their madness when they do that, right? When you read, Homer talks about Memnon, right? The king of Ethiopia. And he calls him, he talks about his woolly hair, overfleeced with bending eye. He talks about his beauty. He talks about his wonder. He talks about his land. There was a love there because they understood that black, right, meant beautiful. That black also in Greek had another meaning. Now, I'm getting into all of this because I want you to understand that when all of this myth influences people like Campbell, who later goes about looking at how screenplays, right, how things were written with the hero, right? I used to laugh because this woman used to tell me, she said I used to call him tall, dark, and handsome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was Mae West's, they said that was Mae West's idea of letting you know what Hollywood stars had black in them.
Yeah.
Really?
It's a lot of them. Sergio Valentino.
Yeah.
Is it Clark Gable?
Clark Gable. All of the people that had black in them. You know, I was watching Johnny Cash.
That's where Tall, Dark, and Handsome came from.
That's exactly where it comes from. You got that melanin in you, right? And it also comes from the idea that they saw. Why do you see so many movie stars tanning their skin.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you look at it, if you look at the way Joseph Campbell wrote it, right? And I'm saying this because you look at Star Wars, right? The troopers in the black and in the white, Darth Vader in the black, Luke in the black, right? When you look at these things and you understand the story that's behind it, what is the writer trying to say? What are they influenced by? And this is not all racism. I'm not trying to say that people are pointedly racist.
Right.
But what I am saying is that if you have had over 100 years of film, this is even with black writers, right? Over 100 years of film, we study film, we watch films, and we pick up things. Rather, we pick it up consciously or unconsciously. And when we write our screenplays, we wind up writing into stereotypic tropes, right? That we find ourselves writing in because that's what's established. That's what's known. So when you play the color thing and flop in the color, what color are they? Well, I'll tell you out there, right? The original myths did not look at anybody who was ghostly white as being a good thing. As a matter of fact, it was so bad, it was more sexist than color, because the Greeks believed that those things that were associated with white skin were feminine. That's why all of their women were shown to be of white and pale skin. But we don't know this history. So what we do is we constantly, I heard Cat Williams say on an interview recently, it's a circular thing here. We constantly repeating the same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
But I talked too long. I just want to let y'all know that whole.
No, you know, before we got you in, man, you dropped them jewels, man. So no,
it's important, man, that we understand. We understand. Look, I didn't want to. We got that whole situation going on in Buffalo right now.
Yeah.
Replacement. I heard everybody on television. I got all my wife and my kids today was watching. I said, everybody talking about supremacy. It's replacement. When Dylan Roof killed those people in Mother Emanuel Church, what did he say? He told before he shot that woman's grandson and then shot her, he told them when they was trying to negotiate, when this from testimony of the people that survived and from him, he said, you are replacing us. You are removing us. This young brother that just did this crime, he said the same thing. We're not teaching people the truth. We're muddying the waters, even in our visual, even in our movies. If we keep telling people that there was no atrocity, there was no pain, there was no worry, right? There was no issue, then what we're telling people is that every pain that you feel, everything that you're thinking is acceptable because they're lying to you. And they are lying to you. But you take that lie in a different way. You digest it in a different way. And you say, well, they got this color-clouded mentality. See, that tells us right there they're trying to replace us. They put a black man in the role of a white man, right? That's just that right there is replacement theory, right? Yeah. And it supports that crazy psychotic mind that says, okay, if you want proof, here's your proof, right? And unfortunately, arguing over mermaids, arguing over princesses, talking about who's playing what, right, is moronic. Because in the end of the day, if you want to tell a story that is inclusive, tell that story. But I'm going to top and tell you about the screenwriter. Now I'm going to put on the screenwriter hat. Screenwriting is done two ways. I tell people when I used to teach them. You either do it by establishing place, right? Or you do it by establishing character. I tend to write by character. I'm going to give you an example. If I write the story of Black Panther, then I tell a story of this king and this culture that's isolated from the world, right? That's character. I base that off of the character, and I build the character with his father and that whole intricate display of how character works. His environment has to agree with his character, right? So I can't make him a white man who just jumped out of the sky and was accepted by this. That wouldn't make any sense. So what I do is I write an African character and I build to his community. I could also, on the other side, say I'm going to build this culture. And out of this culture, what they do, I describe the culture. Authors tend to do this when they write books. You establish the environment, and the character comes out of the environment. Screenwriters tend to write the character and build the environment that appeals to the character. So that makes sense when you're sitting here writing in your world. Now, I mean that by your world. So if I'm writing a world of a mermaid, okay, if she black, where's she coming from? Right? Is she African? Is she, why is her skin colored? Right? Why is she dark? Now,
and do you know that was one of the, Eddie, I'm telling you, man, this is one of the arguments. It was like, she can't be black. I'm like, why? Because mermaids live underwater. There's no sun underwater. How is she going to be black? And I'm like, dang,
but if you build a story, Mike, if you build a story and say, okay, and I don't know the script that they wrote, but if I build a story and say, hey, first people in the world were people of color, black, right? So if I say her culture, they, for whatever reason, had to, they came from under the sea, right? But they still derive from us, and by magic or whatever, right? They would keep that traditional color because that's where they came from. That would be a way to be able to continue the story. There's a thing called audience orientation. Mm-hmm. Every screenwriter has to understand audience orientation. What that means is once I build a world, all the logic in that world comes from the writer. Every time me as a writer, I violate that logic, you as the viewer are going, whoa, that don't make sense. Not given what you said, right?
Right. Right.
And a lot of times films are bad because they violate that logic. Case in point, Die Hard. In Die Hard, Bruce Willis loses his shoes, right? Now, Bruce Willis is running around with no shoes and no cuts on his body. That would violate logic, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Yeah. If Superfly, right, was a pimp, hustler, drug dealer, whatever, right? And we all of a sudden say, well, even though that's Superfly was a white guy, right, who grew up about a bunch of black people. And if we don't establish the environment and we just drop that white
and we
guy
just
in
make
there,
him white or make this guy,
the audience is gonna say,
that.
"What?
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
So then, is it okay? So then, let's just say, just for the sake of argument, let's just say that Little Mermaid comes out, right?
Okay.
And what if they don't establish the reason why she's the color that she is? I mean, is that something that we just accept for the benefit of the fact that they just casted this girl and she was black, but like, and they just don't say nothing like she's a mermaid, she's black, deal with it. Let's go on with the story.
It's gonna bomb, right? Because again, we're talking about logic here.
Right.
Your logic doesn't make any sense. Have you ever walked out of a movie going, I don't even know what they was doing, man? Or sat there and watched the movie? I've done it with my family because we watch all kinds of crazy movies.
Oh yeah, I see a couple movies I watched. I was like,
and we all look at each other like we just wasted time in our life. We cannot get back.
I'll give you a more recent one. The Matrix.
Oh,
yes.
I sat up there and watched that movie, Eddie. Now, and I was so mad at the Matrix because I love the original ones. And I was so excited for this movie when it came out. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I'm watching it and I'm watching and I'm watching.
And that's all you can do is just watch.
And I'm watching and I'm just like, and it was over. And I literally sat there and was like, I have no idea what just happened.
None.
And why it happened. Why is Doogie Howser the bad guy? I was just so mad after that.
That's what killed me. Doogie Howser the bad guy. Then you got this other guy that 1 minute he clear, that he looked like water, and the next minute he got,
and it's just like you said.
Oh boy, no
logic.
And it's just like you said, like some of the logic I had, like why Morpheus couldn't be in.
That's what I'm talking about, Morpheus.
Yeah, like why was he non-existent in one world, but it was just like what I don't understand that. What is this logic?
It's the logic, and you violate. When I hear filmmakers say, well, the movies suck because people just didn't understand. No, your job as a director is to get me to understand.
Exactly.
Right? Yes. If I can't understand your film, then why am I wasting my money, bro? I'm financing your job. So you should make the logic work for me, right? You know, I'm writing a script right now. Well, I'm off and on writing it, and there's reasons for that. And I was writing this character. And I understand bending reality, especially when you're talking about historical events. But this is a very tragic story. So at the beginning of the story, I have to establish that this guy was living fat off the hog, that they were doing well. And so I have to introduce characters that validate the fact that this black man was doing well before I ever introduce any tragedy, because I know that the rest of the story is tragedy. I do that not just because as a writer, I could be biased and say, well, look, they know he rich, right? And then I just introduce the tragedy. Right. But if I do that, I don't orientate you as an audience. I don't bring you in as an audience to understand. So when we talk about the color thing, that's why I have an issue with it. When we flop around color, because if it's a part of character, we shouldn't be doing it. If it has no relevance, if color has no relevance to character, by all means do it. But if the personage of that character is based on, right, is based on that color, then we have to keep that. They did a movie recently in England about Anne Boleyn, right? And if people know the history, Boleyn was killed by Henry because he accused her of having affairs, not only with just people in the court, but even with her own brother. Mm. And he had her beheaded. Now, they go out and feel like they're being inclusive by going to go get the darkest skinned sister that they can to play the Anne Boleyn character. And I had an issue with that. I said, of all of the English characters, you didn't get her to play the original Queen Elizabeth, which is Boleyn's daughter. You didn't get that. What you did was you went and cast her in a role that you thought was going to be believable because it's a black chick. Obviously, she's going to sleep around. Wow. It's the little things that we do. And that's why I said when we first started the program today, we have to be aware of what we're seeing. The reason why it's so hard to get black people to orientate into film is because we have that BS filter, right? We immediately see something and say, that ain't real. If I do a film and I take people back in time, right? Let's say Back to the Future. I love Back to the Future.
Right.
But they mean too many black people that you saw in Back to the Future other than the dude that worked in the restaurant. Goldie.
I know that too, Eddie. Yeah.
Right? Because they didn't want to talk about that. They wanted to keep the funny, comedic, and I understand that.
Right.
But if I make a film as a black man, I go back in history and there's no racism, man, what the hell are we doing? What are we talking about? Right? There's no place in 150 years
that there's no racism
that I could just walk around the country, even in the North, without somebody challenging me in some way.
And saying, right? Hey, where your papers?
Where your papers at? Are you free? Why are you here? Right? So I just find it lunacy when we just have to be truthful. But see, that's a part of it too. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be truthful because that creates a deeper conversation.
Right. Well, let me ask you this then, because you talk about the little things and just little things like that and how they kind of put stuff in the movies that we don't pay attention to. I know a lot of people that had a problem with the movie Soul. And because remember, I don't know if you remember, but when Soul was coming out, they were really pushing it like, oh, this is like because Jamie Foxx was like, oh man, so excited because it's the culture and this, that, and the other, and they was really, really pushing it like, it's gonna be like a black animated film. Mm-hmm. And 80% of the film was him as a little blue light.
Not black.
And he wasn't black. I mean, his character was black, and you knew that. And then not only was he a light, then he was a cat.
Yeah.
And he was only black.
You made me watch that movie, Mike. Now that I remember.
Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the movie.
I watched it with my kids. I enjoyed.
I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed the message behind the movie.
Yeah.
But I was disappointed because I really would have wanted to see that club life. Like that jazz life, man. That whole
you sold the movie off the idea
that's what
that
you
it was
sold, though.
Exactly.
The movie was called Soul. So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be like a movie about a jazz player and like an animated Mo Better Blues, and it wasn't.
No, and that's the non-color identifier of Hollywood right now, where non-gender, non-color, no specifics, just general, right? And that's hard to write something where you're just making everybody so generalized.
Yeah.
You know, you make a good point with Soul, because in the end of the day, we talked about Lion King earlier. When you approach people from a truthful standpoint, from a truthful story, they can connect better. Not saying that they could not watch the movie. Look, I could go watch Flubber. I could go watch Snow White. I could go watch any of those films with my kids, and we will probably enjoy the film as a film, Peter Pan or whatever. But again, in the end of the day, when you're saying you want to have an inclusive story, then I need to see my culture in that story, right? I need to see where we are in that story. And so I think that some of that gets lost. Souls is an example. We try really hard. It's gotten so bad. People get mad at me. When Hamilton came out, I'm not a fan of Hamilton.
Really?
Oh, I hate Hamilton.
Really?
And I told
I've heard a lot of people say that though, Mike.
I mean, for entertainment purposes, Gabriel loves it. Look, Gabriel loves
people
Hamilton.
do, and people do love it. I am not a fan of it for two reasons. Historically, I don't like that. I think that we take away from. We could have done a better job of teaching our kids about Alexander Hamilton in a musical. But the idea of making certain people black, this person Latino, this whatever, we cloud the waters again of reality.
So let me. I'm gonna go ahead and finish, and I want to ask you a question.
Because what happens is visual is everything. I said that about film. I said that about what people see is what they believe. What they are told is what they believe. A lot of people won't go back to do the secondary research analysis. They're just going to say what I saw in that movie must be right, and that show. And so when we make it seem like you can go probably ask some young kids, what color was this person? And they will, if they watch Hamilton, oh, he was black. No, he wasn't. He was white. He was a racist white man, right? Who lived in a racist time, right? But we write these things and we do these shows to manipulate the idea of history. And that's one of my major reasons why I didn't like it.
So let me ask you a question then. How do you feel about diversity in films? And when I'm asking that, when they me personally, I don't like to see characters or cultures shoehorned into a show or a movie just for the sake of being inclusive, right? I'll give you an example. Now because of the day that we live in, gay and trans and and that particular lifestyle is very prominent. And it seems like every time I turned around, they were putting these characters into shows that had already been around for a while. And not necessarily because the character fit, but just because they wanted to show that we are inclusive and we want to add you, we're going to add your people, to the show, right? When blacks are inserted into movies or shows just for the sake of being inclusive, would you rather them not do it, or do you say no, go ahead and do it for the sake of diversity?
I think I would rather them not to, but if you're going to put them in the show, again, it comes down to orientation.
Gotcha.
It comes down to logic. Have a reason. When you have friends in your life, people there's a reason why you chose those people to be friends, right? People in your family, there's a reason why they're there. You're born, they're the cousin. You all are born into that family. There's logic in that. When we take away from the logic, you make a good point. I can't stand that. It's not that I don't like diversity. It's the fact that diversity that has been pushed down your throat will only make people reject it.
Yep. And that's where I think that's what and ultimately I think that's where the backlash came from with this. I believe race played a part in it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I believe race played a part in it, but I also believe because that was right around that time when everybody wanted to be inclusive and all this stuff. And when they casted her, a lot of people was like, is she really the best person for this role? Or are you just casting her because you want to quell the complaints of the Black community?
And understand yes, there is a part of that, Mike, because failure in film, right, prevents similar films from being made.
Got you.
If I make a film and I put a Black person in this film and I say, hey, it didn't do good in the box office, right? Then it gives the studios and the moguls the excuse to say, well, we don't finance Black film because they don't do well.
Exactly.
But they always had that notion that Black films didn't do well.
But it was a lie.
Right. It was a blatant lie. It's like, where do you get this idea from?
If you consider the fact, and this comes down to Americanism, right? If you consider the fact that we over in America as if white people are everything. They are the biggest thing in society. But I remember Francis Cress Welsing said that if you took the whole of humanity, all over the planet, yellow, brown, whatever, right? And you put them up together against white folk, the whites who are on this planet, we outnumber them.
Yeah.
We outnumber them. Why do you think kung fu films resonated so much in Black communities? Why do you think that people watch Bollywood films? Why do you think that people of color, right, associate very well? I remember being in the Middle East, right, and Will Smith's movies were going by gangbusters, right? Yeah. Because you are closer to what I look like.
Yep.
Than what that person looks like.
Yes, sir.
Why do you think that Hollywood now has said that we don't care if the movie sells in Asia, right? They don't care that the movie sells in Asia because they want to push their rhetoric out there regardless. Because for a time, those films weren't being seen. People don't know that a lot of times over in other countries, they cut parts of films out that the countries do that they think are insulting to them.
Showed. Like what was? There was something that was just recent where they didn't let the movie play. I think it was Spider-Man because they had the scene with the Statue of Liberty.
Oh,
it was like, no, we want the Statue of Liberty cut out of the movie. Otherwise, we won't show it.
It comes down to American imperialism.
Yeah.
The idea, and then let's be honest too. What did America do? We look at the films, the Western. I love Westerns. I'm a huge fan of Westerns.
I don't know what it is,
but I love Westerns.
But it's like my dad used to watch them, and I hated them. Do you know now? I will sit and watch a Western and be like, oh my! Like when that Western that came out, the Netflix one, the one with Idris Elba.
Oh yeah.
Man, look, I've watched that movie about 10 times already, man. Yeah. I love that movie.
But there's we watch those films, but the Western, right, as it was written, basically was fed from the Eastern, right? Akira Kurosawa, people who created samurai movies, and then they took those samurai movies, and made them into Westerns over here, right? And we've done that. We continually in the Hollywood and in America take films from overseas, redo the film over here, rename it, refix it, put a white face in front of it, and put that movie out. Spike Lee made me mad a couple of years ago when he did Old Boy, because I said, why would you go and remake Old Boy?
Who was that? Josh Brolin, I think.
Yeah, when the original was a classic. It was classic. I don't think you can add anything to that, right? Why? I tell my son, I try to watch a lot of films when I get the chance. But I was telling him, it's like, you notice that a lot of the Asian films now, they don't subtitle their films really no more.
Nope.
Because they're tired of Americans taking their films, right, subtitle them, and then come out a couple of years later and say, hey, this is our idea. And you go, wait a minute, I saw that movie.
I saw that same scene about 3 years ago.
You ain't do nothing different. Only thing you did different was put in a white face. Right? That's all you did. That's all you did.
You gotta put that white protagonist in there.
There you go.
Hello.
That white protagonist
save everyone.
Exactly. And there's another. That's why you hit that part there too. The other reason is we don't care about putting a person in a in a mermaid role.
Right.
We don't care about what's the other movies that they redid. Putting somebody, say, in a sub role, like Will Smith did when they did the live action of Aladdin. We don't care about that. But I will be dang if I'm gonna make them the hero that's gonna change something or make them to be the main focus of this story. Because if we do that, where they're saving somebody that looks, especially if they're saving white people, we ain't gonna do that. We're not gonna do that.
You know what, you say that, but I would not be surprised if the prince in this movie, in this Little Mermaid, if he ends up being, like the hero and saving air. And I see it, man. I promise
the way we write.
It's just film. That's why I was so shocked with Frozen when they had, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but like I was so shocked with Frozen when they had the prince to be like the bad dude, and it was really like the sisters that was kind of like, they ended up being the heroes of the movie. But I was not expecting that twist, because in Disney movies it's traditionally the prince that's the guy. He is the man, and the only other time I've ever seen that was in Beauty and the Beast, when Gaston was when he was the evil guy and the Beast was like the good guy, although he was still a white guy after he got changed back. But you know what I'm saying? But yeah, but that's always the case. Even when there's a black character, there always seems to be a white character, whether he's a sub character or a main character, that always seems to be the black character's savior in some way.
Yeah,
always.
I asked a question several years ago. I got into it with people online, and I asked folks. I said, point me out. This is before Black Panther. Point me out an actual heroic black character in a film.
Right.
And people start throwing me names and different things.
Because I would have said Morpheus, but then when you look at Morpheus, he still wasn't the one.
He was not the one. Morpheus was standing down there toward the end of the original movies, looking up there saying, "I dreamed a dream." Right. Mm-hmm. Somebody told me Blade, and I said, "You trying?" But he had Whistler.
Whistler.
Right. Whistler saved him. Whistler made his weapons. Whistler was, and so it's very hard for us to go through and find those characters. This is why I gave so much credit to Sidney Poitier, because I've always felt that Sidney went out of his way to make sure, even if he was a sub character, that he played that character to either equal status or heroic status along with the people that he was with. We don't give the credit enough for that, because he was put in the roles that could have easily been a subservient role, but it was his approach to it, right? His approach to it. When you watch the Defiant Ones, right, and they're fighting all the time, and Sidney is whooping that dude's behind, right? Mm-hmm. So every time you hit me, I'm gonna put more on you, right? It could easily been a role like, "Oh, stop." Wasn't like that, right? He pulled the chain, I'm gonna pull the chain back. And so Tony Curtis respected Sidney for that. He said, listen, it ain't gonna be shuffling, right? Ain't gonna be none of that. And so we've gotten out of that. I think Denzel tries to do that in his films too. He tries to play roles, but it's hard. Like, I love the Equalizer, right? I like his Equalizer movies, but at the same time, I understand that was not a black character initially. That was a white character.
Do you remember the TV show Michael Caine? Yeah. He played the character. That's actually more the role that I think Queen Latifah is doing now. Yeah. But that was a show, I remember that back in the day, called The Equalizer, and Michael Caine was the main character. Yeah. Sure was. You know what? I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna go. I love Black Panther, and I just want to see more films like that, and like The Lion King, that not only me, but just kids my color, when they watch it, they can kind of connect more with, right? I love black characters in movies, but I want to see them in more roles where they're not always, like these stereotypical type of, comic relief or sidekicks or somebody that needs saving or whatever the case may be. It just seems like we just don't give enough of those films. I was so shook with Moana, and I think I might have told you this. And I love that film, and it made me. I loved it, and it made me a little sad at the same time because our kids don't have movies like that. Like, do you remember that scene in Moana? Because she always had this affinity for the ocean, and she didn't know why she loved the ocean as much as she did. And her grandmother had led her to that cave where all the derelict ships were and stuff, and she kind of got in contact with her spirits, and she learned that her ancestors were voyagers. And when she came running out of that cave, she was so excited because she was like, we were voyagers. Yep. And she finally understood why she was the way that she was. And I'm like, can we please get something like that?
But see, that's the thing, Mike. That's the thing that they don't want. And there are people who really don't want that.
Man.
That sense of self is why you guys do show that you do, is why I do what I do. The idea of knowing yourself and who you are and where you come from, it's right?
Important, man.
It's so important to your daily walk.
Yes, sir.
Because there's not a day that I don't get up and when I'm tired and I don't want to go do something and I said, I don't remember my grandfather, right? And I don't think about, I'm sure he was tired. I'm sure we learn from what we see, just like they learn from what they see.
Exactly.
There's a reason why you have a Columbus Day. Columbus, when it was proposed, the senator that got up there said the Italians need to have a sense of who they are, of the things that they've contributed to the world. So he understood that, and they made it into a holiday. We had to fight for decades, right, to get Dr. King's birthday as a holiday.
They had to make a song before they put it on.
Had to get up there and fight with these people simply so we understood sense of self.
And Arizona held back. I don't know if Arizona finally accepted, but Arizona held back for a long
time. And I think they still holding back in some parts.
And they still hold back because now they have, on the day that they celebrate King's birthday, they celebrate Robert E. Lee. In some states, right? They call it a Confederate Day. So we're still, it's no idea of sense of self. Politicians fighting you on how CRT and teaching history and everything that's going on, and then we see the results of it. Because the cloudiness of the waters, as we've been talking about this whole episode, is making people get lost. They don't see what really is. History is painful. Where we come from can be hard, but it grows us.
Right.
It makes us. So it's important. And I appreciate, like, you brothers doing what you're doing. That's what we got to keep doing. You just got to keep pushing those messages.
That's why I appreciate Django.
Man.
People look, no, I'm serious.
Django was a good movie.
People hated Quentin Tarantino because it was like, why he had to use the N-word in the movie so many times? If you're going to do a set piece like that,
hey man,
you gotta have some notorious white people doing some notorious stuff.
Django with the mess out of that.
I'm just saying, Samuel L. Jackson, people hated him in that role. I'm like, but you gonna
tell me that them
guys existed?
That was Stephen really existed.
Stephen existed.
Those drivers. Man. And as I told y'all once before, they still exist today.
They still exist.
What
today.
That nigga doing up on that nag?
They still pushing you, right? They still pushing you.
Right.
When you see brothers putting out the diabolical things and you be like, oh man, why would this brother even do that? Right?
Yeah, man.
They doing it because they them pushes, right?
Yep.
And then people say, man, remember a couple of years ago, what's that rapper that came out a couple of years ago that was talking about even worse, the Harriet Tubman thing, Harriet Tubman porno movie, right? Oh, it's funny. No, it's not funny. But the reality of it is there was some white executives that was up there like, yeah, that's funny, man.
That's hilarious. I like that idea. Like
that's why Dave Chappelle stepped away from his show, man.
Yeah,
yep.
He said once they start laughing at you and not with you, it's time to go. Hey,
it's time to go.
They don't want to talk about Chappelle no more because they mad at Chappelle because Chappelle understands.
Yeah,
hey man, you're not gonna pimp me,
right?
Because it's really what this comes down to.
He said he did a skit, Mike. He did a skit. He said the way the white folks was laughing, it just didn't settle with him.
It didn't sit right with him. Well, it's just like
realize now y'all not laughing with me.
It's just like when he was telling the story about the about the FCC. I think that's who it is. When about like certain things you can say on TV and things you can't. And he did a skit where he used the word faggot, and they called him in there and they said, "Hey, Dave, you really can't use that word." And he was just like, "Okay, I get it." And then he asked, he's like, well, why can't I use that word? It was like, well, because you're not gay. So coming from you, it seems insensitive. And he was like, okay, I guess I get it. But then he went back and he said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, well, I use the N-word a lot and nobody gets upset that I use that. And I'm not a nigger.
But you know what, Mike, going back to
and I was like, wow, that's that right there, man. That just
different thinking.
But
different
you know what,
thinking.
Mike, going back to what brother Eddie K said, a lot of stuff we accept in roles and stuff. That's why back in probably about 5-6 years, I had a big problem with a lot of my female friends and female relatives because I didn't like scandal, brother Eddie.
Not me either.
I didn't. And I couldn't see how all these black women would champion her when she was portraying a mistress who was sleeping with the white president. And that didn't settle with me. And you just hating her. Why are you black women championing it? No,
because
Olivia Pope is all that. No, she's not.
They saw her as a powerful woman.
But that wasn't being powerful.
But in their eyes, she was because of the pull that she had and the stuff that she was able to achieve. In their eyes, Olivia Pope was that chick.
Yeah, but she really was. All she was none more than a side chick.
So I never was a Scandal fan, and I'm like, whatever.
It's a Jezebel stereotype. It is. It's unfortunate, but we've had black sisters. I've said this, and I've said this many times. A lot of black people do not understand. One of the major issues that I have with African Americans, black card, whatever you call it, is our inability to understand propaganda. We are victims of propaganda all the time. And so one of the courses that I'm trying to build right now is one of the lessons goes into how to look at something clearly, how to analyze it clearly. I'll give you guys a brief example because I know you're running over. But when they reported the whole situation with Buffalo, I watched the local news of that area, and the lady said, this is what she said. She said he rode all the way up to the store. And when she said it, my analytical mind said, all the way up to what? Right? The first thing I asked myself, what she mean he rode all the way up? That phrase didn't even sound right. And then later on, a little bit later, the national news said, oh, he drove 200 miles to get where he was at. And then I said to myself, why didn't this lady report that the way it was? Why did she hold that off? My wife watched a footage recently of a girl being chased by a truck, a SUV through a park. She's screaming. And they're trying to find out if the girl's okay and where the truck is. And the news did a whole thing on it, right? See the truck pass way at a distance. But they shared a still photo of the truck right by the gate of the lady's house where the camera was. I said, well, why didn't they show that footage where the truck was right there by the gate? See, it's the game that is played with us propaganda-wise, and we don't understand the little subliminals and little things that they do. And we have to get better at that because back in the 50s and the 60s, it was a wink and a nod, right? Civil rights workers got killed. The police chief in Washoba County said, we're going to go find them boys probably up in New York. And if they not, we're going to find out where they went. Wink and a nod because he knew where they were, right? He actually quite literally in footage winked, right? We got to understand that the media is not always our friend. Right. It's not always looking out for us in these films and these television, these songs, right? We got to understand that so that we can be better at looking at who we are and learning who we are for ourselves. So when you say people going toward the Sapphire character, yes, because when you have somebody, I remember Andrea Williams wrote that the girl rolled her eyes thinking about her grandfather in one of her books, The Black Hooker, where she says that, he rolled his eyes as the white man mounted her from behind, but she felt empowered. That's not empowerment. And we shouldn't be teaching our kids that that's empowerment, but we do.
Yeah.
Wow. Good stuff, man. Look, oh man.
As usual, Eddie, you can't.
I know, man. That hour, boy, I tell you.
I know, man. They go quick too,
They
though.
go quick, man. They go real quick. They go real quick. But look, before we get up out of here, man, why don't you go ahead, tell the people about Erudition Network and where they can find you.
All right, so what we're doing on the Erudition Network, we're doing this thing. I'm really focused on teaching Black history, on getting our people to have a better understanding what we just talked about, sense of self. My wife has a show on Adroit Living where she tries to get people how to live an adroit, clever, faith-filled life, better understanding, and also understand where you can go if you have problems. So Erudition is really, when we establish Erudition, it's about knowledge and understanding. I deal a lot with history, and I'm very focused on that. But as we move forward, we're going to start doing more things with knowledge. We have a new show that's going to be kicking up here real soon, called Erudite Insight. That's basically going to be almost like a TED Talk, 10 minutes, where we want to get on there and approach a subject and give you 10 minutes of how to look at it analytically. So will you we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, go look for the Erudition Network, click on it, subscribe, ring the bell, like whatever, and help us, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate everybody else.
That's what's up, man. Look, I love me some TED Talks. So that Erudite Insight, that's going to be, I'm looking forward to that, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was working on that yesterday. Yeah. But yes.
That's what's up. All right, so y'all make sure, listen, y'all go check them out. YouTube, Facebook, man, y'all already know the vibes. Social media, check out Erudition Network and Brother Eddie K. Phillips, man. Wealth of knowledge. You talk about, it goes beyond Black history. Let's just say that. It goes beyond Black history. And I love what he said. It's really gearing towards a sense of self. Because in the world that we live in, man, trying to find us seems to be getting harder and harder as time go on. So brothers like him that's doing that work and really trying to keep that in the forefront and make it accessible for us, man, is a blessing, and we need to learn to appreciate it and to build it up. So build up the Erudition Network. Go follow Eddie K. Phillips. Go follow the Erudition Network. YouTube, Facebook. I'm sure he all on social media. I don't just look for him. Just Google Erudition Network and Eddie Phillips, and you're gonna find him. I'm sure he'll
find me somewhere.
Up there. He's gonna be somewhere. Listen, next week we got a good one. Yeah, Brother Eddie actually kind of inspired me to do so, and Phil was like, Mike, let's make it happen. So we're gonna do a young man up on next week, man. We got some young guys coming on.
Sweet.
And we are just giving them, we just gonna open the mic to them and just because man, look, a lot of our young brothers don't really have a place where they can just talk. And it's a no judgment, it's a judgment-free zone. So we just gonna let them come on, and we just gonna talk, and we're gonna see where it go, man. I'm looking forward to it, and and it should be real good. So listen, we're about to get up out of here. I love you all and appreciate y'all. Those that are joining us live and those that are watching this later, please, if you haven't already, push that little subscribe button.
Yes,
subscribe,
please,
like, share.
Please.
Listen, it don't take. Listen. I'm trying to teach y'all something. It don't take much to grow something. It takes you 5 seconds to like and share. You push that, done. And that's all you got to do. And this is how you help to grow shows like this and shows like Erudition Network. So please like, tag, and share your friends, family, whoever in this video. Listen, we're about to get up out of here. On behalf of our guest, Brother Eddie Phillips, and on behalf of my partner, Mr. Philip Hines, this has been the Men Up Real Talk podcast. And I am your host, Mike Wiley. And until we meet again, my friends, y'all get 2 fingers to the side. Make sure you holler at your boys, because we out.
Later.
Peace.